This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Eben Janssen. The show is very much live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube now, as always, with the whole show available all day on demand on our YouTube channel. We have a packed show for you today with fires still raging on in the Cape Peninsula. We get an update also from Lesotho, where final election results are expected later today. We talk fracking then, the pros and the cons. Adoption remains a contentious issue in South Africa. We also look at the increase in fake qualifications around the country, and we close with Terry Bien and African design. But first, the day's news from Anindo Mal.
Good morning, I'm Anindo Mal. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. Cape Town firefighters are still struggling to contain a flare-up of fires in Constantiaberg, Tokai and Tierboskloof. About 8 structures have been gutted in Tokai and some people were evacuated as the fires moved towards Noordhoek. The City of Cape Town has called up all off-duty personnel and firefighters from the Free State and the Eastern Cape to help. Yesterday, an additional 250 firefighters were deployed to Cape Town to blast the efforts to contain the blaze. It is hoped that the light rain forecast over the region today will bring some relief. The final election results and allocation of seats in Lesotho's parliament is expected to be announced today. Prime Minister Tom Tbane's party, the All Basotho Convention, took 40 constituencies. The Democratic Congress won 37, the Lesotho Congress for Democracy 2, and the Basotho National Party 1. After the announcement, the parties will have 14 days to finalize their dealing and form a new government. The National Union of Mine Workers will be holding a mass meeting to update former Aurora workers on legal action relating to the liquidation of the company. This after the High Court in Pretoria dismissed an urgent application by Kulubuse Zuma to have claims of over 1.5 billion rand against Aurora Empowerment Systems set aside. Some of Aurora's workers have been waiting to be paid for around 5 years. The Seriti Commission of Inquiry is expected to resume this morning, with arms deal critic Dr. Richard Young set to take the stand. Evidence leaders have been struggling to bring Young before the Commission to explain allegations of fraud and corruption. Young was first summoned to appear before the Commission in July 2014, but failed due to medical reasons. The Commission of Inquiry, which is investigating the 1999 arms deal, has already cost taxpayers over 80 million rand. Boko Haram's video showing the apparent beheadings of 2 men has raised concerns that the group is seeking inspiration from international militant networks. The Islamist extremist group posted a 6-minute video showing advanced graphics and editing techniques online on Monday. In the video, 2 men suspected of being spies are shown with their arms tied to their backs. They are made to face the camera on their knees, with another man towering over them, brandishing a knife. And in the cricket, Pakistan got a final score of 339 for 6 after batting first. We can see the current score there now with the UAE on 91 for 3 after 25 overs. We'll keep you updated with those live scores. Remember, you can also follow us on Facebook. Just search for Newsroom for all the latest stories. Also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Thank you. The City of Cape Town says 350 people have been evacuated overnight from Noordhoek and Tokai, and that 8 structures were either damaged or gutted by the fire there last night. Firefighters worked throughout the night to contain a flare-up of fires in Constantiaberg, Tokai and Tierboskloof. Fires are still raging above Muizenberg, Clavalley, Lakeside, Hart Bay, as well as Kirstenbosch. An approaching cold front and lower temperatures is expected to bring relief to the Cape region and the firefighters. Yesterday, the city experienced a maximum of 42 degrees centigrade, reportedly the hottest day in 100 years. It also made Cape Town the hottest place on the planet yesterday. Now, for an update, let's go to our reporter, Vanessa Puna, who's still following this story, the devastating story it is. Good morning to you, Vanessa.
Good morning, Eben.
Properties have been gutted overnight. Swanswyk, one in Suttle Road, Alton Road, Almondbury Lane and Tokai. Are there any updates before you go into your interview?
Eben, yes. This morning we spoke to firemen at the Newlands fire base, and the sense that we got from them is that last night they really fought a losing battle, if it were, with strong winds coming up overnight, making their task nearly impossible. Also, we do know that this morning they did a reconnaissance flight just to assess how far the fire spread overnight. Hot and dry conditions yesterday, but then the wind pushed up overnight, and this morning quite a cooler here in Cape Town. Just a little bit of wind this morning seems to have died down again, but not the rain that we expected to see this morning, which would have helped firefighters in the efforts to bring the blaze under control.
I understand you have one of those that have been evacuated there overnight. It must have been a real scary experience for them.
Yes, indeed. The information we have at this stage is that over 300 people have been evacuated in the Tokai and Nuatuk areas. And with me right now, I have Nikki von Bratt. Nikki's family, 3 families altogether, have been evacuated in the early hours of this morning. Nikki, you've just told me just now that you have had very little sleep last night. Devastating, news that you had to up and leave your home. Just tell us, surely it must have been quite a shock to you to experience this.
Yes, no, we actually got news 1 o'clock this morning that we had to evacuate. Fortunately, from 5 o'clock yesterday, we did start clearing out the house, putting our furniture on the lawn, covering it with tarpaulins. We had so many helpers. We had so much support. We had all our friends and family. And then 1 o'clock, I got from Sandparks confirmed that we had to get out. The wind just picked up drastically, and the fire was coming down the gorge above us, and some of the gum trees had started burning. So I phoned my mum in Constantia. She came through at about 2 o'clock to help get us out. And as we got our stuff to my mum's house, they got told they had to evacuate, so we were given literally about half an hour there until the next load. I came back with my stuff to there. We had 5 minutes to get out of my mum's place. They're in Bel Air Drive, and Price Drive people were out the houses. So we've evacuated my folks, my sister up Swanswyk Road. They did horses and animals and everything last night. I can't actually remember what time. I had no sleep last night. The night before I managed 4 hours sleep, and the night before that I had an hour's sleep. So we've really been on the go. Yeah.
Nikki, I've also learned that this is not the first time that your family, has been affected by, by fires. Yeah. Something similar happened in the year 2000.
Yes, my grand's house, Joan Pear, she lost her house in the 2000 fires, and we had the whole of our small holding burnt. There were other cottages there. That 2 wooden cottages did survive the fire then, but we know what it's like. The fires can jump, even though you think the fire's far away and you think you've still got 10 houses between you and the fire. It doesn't work like that. The wind blows the sparks and it can hit anybody at any time in the vicinity. So it all just be on a red alert.
So Nikki von Bratt really having suffered after being evacuated from her home, as well as her family members also evacuated from their homes last night due to this fire, which firemen are really battling to contain at this stage.
Vanessa, quickly, there are other firefighters from around the country that are incorporated in this fight. How are they going?
Well, we know that the first batch of 100 firefighters that have been brought in from other provinces have been deployed to the fire line this morning, as early as 6 o'clock this morning, with another 100 expected to go into the fire line at midday at 12 o'clock. And then we've also learned that the additional 50 members are on standby for other fires that are raging across the Western Cape. I know that in places like Hermanus, there are also huge fires that firefighters are battling at this stage. So yes, those firefighters have arrived and they have joined the efforts of over 300 firefighters that were battling the blaze since it broke out above Muizenberg in the early hours of Sunday morning.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Vanessa Puna coming to you live from Tokai there in the Western Cape with an update. 350 people have been evacuated overnight. The situation is not under control at the moment. Firefighters from all over chipping in on this platform. We'll keep you updated how the fire story develops throughout the day. Now, today's picture of the day, well, it comes from Isaac du Plessis and it's captioned, "Fire at Ronderburg Road between Malmesbury and Cape Town." Here you can see what it's like for residents who are fighting the fire from their homes. That's the picture of the day from Isaac du Plessis. Thank you very much, Isaac, for that picture that you've sent through. Let's just take a look at your tweets now. At SABC Newsroom is where you can send us fire pictures. Kurt Mitchell says the wind is blowing the rain towards the mountain, but it's light rain and a strong wind. Talking about the Cape Fire Muizenberg. Yes, it seems the wind is really bedeviling efforts there. Vanashri Naidu says, "My thoughts with everyone affected by the Muizenberg fire." Then Natasha Moller says, "Nuatuk declared a disaster area." Yes, it is a disaster area. Quite a few homes have been gutted in the Nuatuk area. Tamsin says, "I had a nightmare about these terrible Cape Town fires. Is there anything a Joburg girl can do to help?" Talking about the Jolly Jammer. Julia Baker says, "A light drizzle this morning in Cape Town. Hope it helps to dampen the Cape Town fires and help our heroes." Talking about the Muizenberg fires there, Julia Baker. Keep it coming. We love your contributions, especially pictures. We'll have a look at some of the pictures that we found on our social media feeds a little bit later in the show. We'll have a look at some pictures. Incredible pictures, really. Now, another top story, the Lesotho Independent Electoral Commission will today announce the final results of that country's weekend election. No political party achieved an outright majority to form a government on their own. The IEC is finalising the allocation of the remaining 40 seats that are proportional to the total national vote. Now, in a National Assembly of 120 seats, 80 are contested by political parties in various constituencies. The other 40 proportional representation seats are allocated to compensate the parties with most voters nationally. Prime Minister Tom Tabane's party, the All Basotho Convention, took at least 40 constituencies. The Democratic Congress won 37, the Lesotho Congress for Democracy 2, and the Basotho National Party a single seat. After the announcement, the parties will have 14 days to finalise their dealings and form a new government in that country. We were going to get an update from Vuyo Mvoka, but it seems we have a little bit of technical difficulty in crossing to him. But let's take a look at what's happening elsewhere in the world. We start with the Vanguard. Beyond the continent in Nigeria, photos of candidates of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board who besieged an office of the body, smashing vehicles and destroying valuables, leading to the arrest of at least 50 of them. They were due to collect registration slips, but got impatient after waiting in line for hours. Further north in Europe, European papers, Al Pais especially, has the latest on another rift between Israel and the Obama administration. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned the United States Congress that an international deal on Iran's nuclear program could threaten the survival of his country. The Speaker of the House invited Netanyahu to speak without consulting the White House. Then, The Times has the latest on a landmark report calling for an urgent debate to address the number of Muslim men amongst groups convicted of using and selling young teenagers for sex in that country. Let's now take a look at what's happening across the country today. In Cape Town, the 4th Trading Africa Summit is set to discuss Africa's highest interest rates, economic fundamentals, growth and other prospects. Moving to the courts, in Durban, regional court that is, sentencing of the former police spokesman Vincent Ndungi will take place for using a fraudulent matric certificate when he joined the police in 1987. Then, in the Johannesburg High Court, sitting in Palm Ridge, the trial resumes of Lindray Kaku, who is accused of shooting the 3-year-old Luke Tibbets in August of last year. And in the capital, in Pretoria, Richard Young is expected to testify at the Security Commission of Inquiry into the arms deal. That's what's on the diary for today. Time for us now to take a little break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
Hello, it's a favorite minister here. Yane, party is a very nice language because it was written by you, the people. Here's a good one. Try hard, and the individual who tries against all odds. Hoi! Give me water!
Help make Party South Africa's 12th official language. Sign the petition today.
This one is good, hey?
You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Let's just go back to one of our top stories of today. Of course, final election results, that is, as expected in Lesotho, where our contributing editor, Vuyo Mvoko, is standing by in the capital, Maseru. Vuyo, very good morning to you. Can you hear me now? Vuyo Mvoko, we've lost Vuyo, unfortunately. We're having difficulty trying to get the line up. However, time for us to move on. One of the emotive topics here in South Africa, shale gas exploration plays a major role in energy production in countries across the world and could have the same impact in South Africa. However, the process of actually commencing fracking operations seems to be moving at a snail's pace. There are also still a number of issues that certain groups within the country feel need to be addressed. They include questions like, can the Karoo landscape handle it? What would the impact be on the water sources there? Last week, the Treasure Karoo Action Group announced that they will write to Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene to request a breakdown of his 100 million rand budget for fracking. During his budget speech, Nene said 108 million rand would be allocated to prepare for shale gas mining. The Treasure Karoo Action Group is a non-profit organisation aimed at promoting awareness, transparency, accountability and justice around the issue of shale gas exploration here in South Africa, they say. Now, joining us is Jeannie Leroux, who's the Director of Operations for the group. A very good morning to you, Jeannie. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Jeannie, just give us your stance on fracking in the Karoo.
TKG's position is very easy. It's simply that until it can be proven that fracking can be done safely in South Africa and that it will take place for the benefit of all South Africans, we will not be in a position to support it. At the moment, given the international trends with fracking, all the international bans and moratoria, currently a list of over 100 jurisdictions, with all credible reasons of why to be concerned about fracking, we are not in a position to make a decision in South Africa in favor of fracking.
Now, Jeannie, we live in the most unequal society in the world. A country where the gap between the rich and the poor is getting bigger and bigger. Our economy is under pressure. We need some things to happen in order for us to close that gap and to close the gap between the rich and the poor. Shale gas exploration could add 2 points onto our GDP, give us the 5% economic growth that we need over the next decade in order to haul ourselves out of the economic trouble that we are in. Surely there must be a balance found somewhere along the line.
Definitely, I agree with you. As long as that balance is going to be sustainable. We cannot make decisions today and go for economic options that will undermine our ability to look after current and future generations in South Africa. I'm assuming that the figures that you quoted came from the econometrics report that was commissioned and paid for by Shell in 2012. That report has been criticized vehemently by several economists in South Africa and from the United States and other countries. The report is not credible for several reasons, and it cannot form the basis of a decision on fracking in South Africa. We promote development and we are not against development in South Africa, but we do not believe that at the moment fracking is a viable option. And like I said, until it can be proven that it is the right choice for South Africa and it can be done safely, it shouldn't be considered. But we would definitely support any alternative development strategies, especially in the energy field, including renewable energy and other measures to address the economic and electricity problems facing the country.
In the United States, they've been fracking for quite some time. The country is almost energy independent from exports of oil. Therefore, the oil prices dropped around the world. South Africa needs fracking. The government says South Africa needs fracking. You say you don't want fracking. What would make you happy? Where would the balance be?
I think it comes back to our position. We would very much like the government to do a comprehensive study and take account of all the different aspects in this debate, looking at socioeconomic conditions, looking at the potential benefits of shale gas, if there are benefits, looking at the international trends and reasons for being cautious when it comes to fracking, the decisions of other countries. New York State, for example, recently announced that they would be extending their current moratorium based on health concerns, as well as the fact that economic figures seldomly transpire in the end after initial promises to countries. All of those impacts need to be taken into account. The fact that we don't understand the geology in South Africa, that it's likely to be much more risky to operate in than other countries where fracking has been deployed. We cannot simply compare the United States to South Africa. It's completely different. Just on the issue of energy independence, as of 2013, about 51% of all oil on U.S. soil that was being processed at their refineries came from sources outside of the countries outside the United States. So I think the United States is still a very long way from being energy independent. Fracking is, of course, also used for oil production. They're not only for gas, where we're looking at gas in South Africa. So again, it's a very different picture that's transpiring there.
How do we go forward here in South Africa? How do we manage opportunities for 1 in 4 people in South Africa that's unemployed? Fracking can be a game changer with regards to that. You say nothing whatsoever. We have to find a balance, Jeannie. Where would that balance be?
I think we are taking a very rational and balanced approach. We are not shutting out the possibility of doing fracking at some stage in the future. But what we are saying is that if we decide to go ahead, it needs to be an informed decision. It must be based on research, and we need to take into account all the relevant aspects. That includes significant public consultation and involving the public in this decision. Because ultimately, whether fracking will be better or will be worse for South Africa, it will come down to the public, and they will have to bear with the impacts of this for decades to come. So what we are proposing is that government takes a fresh look at this, halt the current process that has been flawed since 2011 for several reasons. Start with a comprehensive baseline testing of groundwater in the Karoo, of air quality, of several other aspects, and as well as do significant research around the potential impacts of fracking, whether it's economic impacts, whether it's environmental or public health impacts. Everything needs to be taken into account. And then we are in a position to do a cost-benefit analysis, involve the public in the debate, and reach a balanced and fair decision for fracking on whether it has to go ahead or not in South Africa. Just on the jobs issue, the data that we are seeing emerging from the United States, the jobs that have been promised since the beginning of shale gas mining in America has not materialized as promised. Many of the jobs are highly technical and skilled in nature, And people need to be brought in from other parts of the country as well as the world to do that type of work. So in South Africa, we would be facing a similar scenario. And it won't necessarily be the unemployed, unskilled people of South Africa that could benefit from jobs. Many of these jobs will be outsourced.
They won't be working directly in fracking because there's certainly it's a specialized skill. But the jobs that will be created in other spheres of the economy because of the economic boost of fracking cannot be denied, Ginny.
No, it cannot be denied. But again, those jobs will only be there for as long as there is gas. And even if we look at just the production figures for gas emerging from the United States that we are likely to see in South Africa, if South Africa does have the gas, it won't be for very long. If you look at the decline curves of these wells on a well-to-well basis, typically wells do not last longer than 3 years on an economic basis. So again, yes, there might be jobs, there might be ancillary jobs, but they will only be there as long as their support is needed for the gas industry. And it's not proving to be decades of jobs and of revenue.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jeannie. I agree with you. We can't only save the flowers and the sheep, we also have to save the people in South Africa. And right now, the people are hungry here in South Africa because they are unemployed. And we have to look at shale gas exploration as a legitimate scenario to boost our economy. That's where I leave my little bit. We move on to another story here in South Africa that is in the news at the moment. Now, there are approximately 1.8 million, yes, 1.8 million adoptable children in South Africa, but unfortunately the trend seems to be on the decline. According to the National Adoption Coalition, or NACSA, here in South Africa, nearly 40% of adoptable children are currently in foster care. Stringent adoption laws, lack of information and corruption may be to blame for the decline, some say. Over the years, unplanned pregnancies, poverty and HIV/AIDS have led to the increase of the number of abandoned babies, putting an already backlogged system under pressure. Now, in our studios here today, we are joined by Pam Wilson, who is an adoption supervisor from Joburg Child Welfare. If I can just take a quick seat. Pam, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Eben.
1.8 million certainly is a massive, massive number. Should we be concerned? What should we be thinking about?
Well, I think it is a concern, definitely. I mean, the numbers of adoptions per year has been steadily decreasing for the last few years. We were at one stage up in the sort of 2000s. We're now down to like 1.4 adoptions a year, which is a drop in the ocean compared to the number of children who are waiting for families. And it is a concern for all social workers involved in the field because obviously we would like to find homes for those children. And there are a lot of impediments at the moment that is making adoption fairly difficult.
Are we, as the wider public and society here in South Africa, are we well informed enough about the processes involved?
I don't think so. I think we're getting there. We've, as the National Adoption Coalition, we've now developed a website which is having, a lot of people visiting it and getting information on all aspects of adoption. But I think the general population still has very little information on adoption, and that is something we're trying to address through consistent advertising campaigns, recruitment and awareness campaigns, to try and get the idea out there that adoption could be a viable option to childlessness, infertility, or just for increasing the size of your family.
Now, the Consolidated Children's Act is viewed by some as a real hindrance in the process of adoption, this new law. Mm-hmm. How do you view this?
The Act itself is very good. I mean, the concept of the Act, the provisions made in the Act are essentially sound, and it's a good piece of legislation. Unfortunately, I think it's the way it's being implemented. I don't think they ever foresaw that it was going to involve an increase in the number of social workers out there to implement the provisions of the Act. Administratively and just in terms of bureaucratic processes, it has slowed things down considerably if you follow every aspect of that Act exactly as it should be read. For instance, as an adoptive parent and a foster parent, you need to get clearance from the Child Protection Register in the form of a Form 30. And in the Act, it says that has to take 21 days. At the moment, it's taking up to 6 to 8 months to get that, which means that a child cannot be placed with that family until we have that clearance from the Child Protection Register. Of course, it's good to have that. I mean, one would like to know that everybody was cleared from the Child Protection Register. But if it's going to take 8 months to get that permission, it's certainly going to cause huge delays in the system.
Certainly puts the process back. Just tell us quickly, who is cleared then to adopt a child? Who can?
Who can adopt a child? You have to be over 18. You can be married or single. You should be South African or have permanent residency in the country. And obviously you should be able to provide for the needs of a child and just to see that child through to adulthood.
What about the rights of the adoptive parents? What rights do they have?
What rights do they have? Well, obviously they go through a screening process. We make sure that they are able to look after a child and that their motivation is sound. And obviously, once they've adopted the child, that child becomes theirs legally. So they then have the same rights as any other parent with that child. The child takes on the adoptive parent's name and becomes their child as if born to them. So they then, unfortunately, the biological parents, if they sign consent for adoption, give up their rights and obligations towards that child, and the adoptive parents take on those rights.
Now, open and closed adoption is also a scenario that I think that people don't quite understand. What's the difference between the two?
There are various degrees of openness. Obviously, closed adoption is where the biological parent knows absolutely nothing about the adoptive parent or might just know very basic details. Openness in adoption means where they can actually get information about the adoptive parents and even information about the child as the child's growing up via the adoption agency. So they might phone in 5 years later and say, I'd love to know how my child's doing. The social worker could then contact the adopters, find out that information and pass it on to them and say, your child's doing well, the child's doing well at school, etc., and just give her a certain amount of information. And then, of course, you go right to the other extreme of openness where there can actually be contact. Obviously, again, via the adoption agency.
What about corruption? Is it a big problem within the adoption scenarios?
Not as far as I know, no. I certainly haven't come across corruption. I've come across difficulties in negotiating the system, but not necessarily corruption.
Well, I thank you for joining us today. Pam Wilson is an adoption supervisor here in Johannesburg. I thank you for joining us to talk about this emotive issue. It's certainly worrying to see the big numbers of adoptable children in South Africa. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, let's have a quick look at your tweets. What are you twittering about? What are we at Twitter on? Well, it's fires in the Western Cape, I can tell you. Storm in Plet says, send us that wonderful picture on Twitter of firefighters as they are busy there in the fight against. There you have a picture of homes under fire. Really? Cork Bay Mountain today. That's right, in Cork Bay for those of us in the north who don't quite get it. There you see a better picture. That's Muizenberg Mountain right on fire. Look at Cape Town fires tonight. Show me where white capital is in this picture. Our land in flames. That one from Neil Collins. There you have another wide shot there from Hendrik. He says, Army helicopter spotted helping putting out the fire. Cape Town fires, hashtag. That's where you'll find some of those pictures if you're looking. And there you have the very brave helicopter pilots who've been at it for days now. Precision, courageous flying at Chapman's Peak. That one from Alahado Ford, I think, was the person who sent in that contribution. Thank you for those wonderful pictures. It really adds a lot and gives us in the other parts of the country a real insight as to how difficult the scenario is that's playing out in the mother city right now. But let's take a quick look at what's on our Facebook page here at Newsroom. Of course, Cape Town firefighters are working around the clock to contain a flare-up of fires in Constantiaberg, Tokai and Tierboschkloof after a very hot and windy night. You can also read more about the Mark Shuttleworth case on our page. The Constitutional Court yesterday reserved judgment in the South African Reserve Bank's application for leave to appeal the Supreme Court of Appeal judgment in favor of the billionaire entrepreneur. And the price of petrol has gone up by 96 cents a litre at midnight, while diesel is up by 74 cents a litre. Paraffin will cost 73 cents a litre more. All of our stories and a whole lot more on Newsroom's Facebook page. You can also visit our website. Of course, it's sabc.co.za/news for all the latest updates from around the country and around the world. Time for another short little break. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just have a look at your top stories today. Cape Town firefighters are still struggling to contain a flare-up of fires in Constantia Bar, Tokai and Kloof. About 8 structures have been gutted in Tokai and some people were evacuated as the fire moved towards Newsroom. The city of Cape Town has called up all off-duty personnel and firefighters from the Free State and Eastern Cape to help. Yesterday, an additional 250 firefighters were deployed to Cape Town to blast the efforts to contain the blaze. It's hoped that the light rain forecast over the region today will bring some relief. The final election results and allocation of seats in Lesotho's parliament is expected to be announced today. Prime Minister Tom Tabane's party, the All Basotho Convention, took 40 constituencies. The Democratic Congress won 37, the Lesotho Congress for Democracy 2, and the Basotho National Party 1. After the announcement, the parties will have 14 days to finalise their dealing and form a new government. And just taking a look at the cricket, we know Pakistan got a final score of 339 for 6 after batting first. Having a look at your latest score there.
Yeah, he's been consistent and good to watch.
We'll keep you updated with what the latest score is from the UAE in just a bit. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC News. Evan, back to you.
Thank you, Anine. Now, former police spokesperson Vincent Mdungi will know his fate today when he appears in the Durban Regional Court for sentencing. He's facing charges of submitting a fraudulent matric certificate when he joined the police in 1987. In November, Magistrate Thandeka Vigeni ruled the matric certificate Mdungi presented was not valid. The value of qualifications, usually some indicator of an employee's abilities, have been under threat from the increasing prevalence of degree fraud, according to qualification verification agencies. In spite of the buying and selling of fraudulent qualification documents being a criminal offence, the demand and supply of these documents is well on the rise here in South Africa. Recently, police arrested 19 teachers across KwaZulu-Natal for allegedly submitting false matric and tertiary qualifications. South Africa's ambassador to Japan, Mahao Peko, told the SABC that she regrets saying she has a doctoral degree when she does not. Peko joins a list of high-profile people who claim fraudulent qualifications that include senior members of the ANC and former MP Paulo Jordan and former SABC chairperson Ellen Shabalala. We are joined in the studio today by the qualification verification specialist and director of iFacts, Jenny Reid. Very good morning to you, Jenny. Thank you for joining us. The problem of forged or fraudulent qualifications How prevalent is that in South Africa? We hear a lot of people say, oh, it's on the rise. Is it really, or has it been a problem for forever?
No, look, it's been a problem. I think there's more publicity around it these days. We're seeing about 1 in 3 of the qualifications that we verify are fraudulent.
And that's not 1 in 3 of all the qualifications in the country.
Well, I think it's a pretty fair statistic.
1 in 3 of
1
all?
in 3, yeah.
Of all qualifications in the country are fraudulent?
Yes.
Wow.
Either fraudulently obtained, or they've lied about the marks on the qualification, or they've just falsified somebody else's certificate. So we see all different types of fraud, but it still means they don't have the qualification they claim to have.
How does this scenario play out? In some instances, we have non-accredited institutions that hand out. What are some of the other scenarios that play out?
Well, we have people who register with a university and claim to have the degree. Meanwhile, they've only registered for the course and never attended lectures, never got the marks. So that's one of them. You can buy them. I mean, off the internet, we get regular scams where you can buy an MBA for $100.
An MBA for $100,
yes,
really?
Yes. So you get those kind of ones. Then you get people who create their own qualifications, and it's often a play on words of the well-known universities and that type of thing. Yeah. So somebody who's not experienced in looking at it won't realize that it's a fraudulent qualification. We had one, for example, from Cambridge, where it was a Cambridge certificate, all the logos were correct and everything, but the course that they had allegedly qualified in, Cambridge didn't offer. So, you know, there's a whole lot, and with scanning and in computers today, you can create anything you want.
What are some of the names of institutions that employers should be on the lookout for that often, or that are often embroiled in these controversies?
You know, I can't say that there's any one that particularly stands out. There are diploma mills, and that's people that sell fraudulent qualifications. But those names change on a regular basis. And that's why it's always useful to use a third party to verify that, who've got the right connections and links into the places where you can actually obtain the correct information.
By law, if you've been employed by a place, what's your experience? If you've been employed by a place and you've earned a fraudulent salary, say of R1 million for a year, do you have to pay that back once you are done, or once you've been exposed?
Interesting debate, and it's the second time recently that I've been engaged in that. I'm not aware of any company that has done it, but I don't see why you shouldn't. Unfortunately, people run away from the judicial system. And in the corporate world, we're seeing a lot less exposed, because one of the questions we asked is, why are we seeing so much of it in government parastatals? I think the corporates do a lot to keep that under wraps, and so to protect reputation. Yeah. So if they went to court to try and recover the money, it would be in the public space, and I don't think people want that.
What do you think is the cost to South Africa, the wider economy, of dodgy qualifications?
You know, to replace an employee, we're saying that it's 50% of the annual salary is the cost of replacing a staff member. So you can put that in the salary range. And I mean, some of our government officials, top-level executives, cost a lot of money. And you take half their annual salary as a cost to a company, and then you've got to replace them. And you've got to train them. Whereas the cost of the verification prior to employment is insignificant.
Well, Jenny, thank you very much for joining us today. It's certainly very worrying to hear an expert say that 1 in 3 of all the qualifications in our country could be dodgy. Thank you. That is Jenny Reid, who is director of IFACTS. They check for dodgy qualifications, and they find 1 in 3 is dodgy. Very concerning indeed. But we move on. I thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Eben.
Now we take a look at your tweets. We move on and we look at South Africa's wonderful result in the cricket yesterday. There you have a picture of the Mighty Hash, as he's called. It's a very happy Hashim Amla with his Protea Fire Man of the Match or Player of the Match award. Player of the Match award that he won yesterday. There we have Chuck Norris had a son. He named him A.B. de Villiers. Yeah, no, there's a lot of that kind of parodying going on. There we go. Break records, we set them. Hashtag Protea Fire. We don't break records, we set them. That's right, the Proteas have certainly set quite a few records in the last week as they resurrected their World Cup campaign. Of course, they play Pakistan. On Saturday morning, South African time. That match will happen in New Zealand. And, of course, Pakistan, well, they engage in a game against the UAE. They're well on top, it seems. They scored 339. UAE have to scored 340 to win that game. Last time I checked, they were 3 down for not a lot. So that's where we leave the cricket. We close today with something totally different. The time of the so-called colonial dark continent is long gone. Africa has over the years become a canvas for the creative soul, with creativity bursting from every corner. Not only does Africa boast a wide variety of designers, artists and creators, it also has over the years become the source pool of inspiration for a variety of international names. Now, joining us to further this discussion is social entrepreneur and brand builder Terry Byrne, who wrote the book Connect with the Continent. And Terry is a frequent contributor here on the show. Good morning, Terry. Nice to have you back with us.
Good to see you.
The time of the so-called dark continent, that's a bit backward, isn't it? It's over, yeah? We're in a new phase on the continent, aren't we?
We are. I mean, you know that, and I know that, and 700 million Africans know that. I think the rest of the world sometimes struggles to keep up.
Creatively speaking, where are we when we talk about African design? We see little spits of African influence throughout the rest of popular culture. Where are we?
Yeah, 10 years ago, African design was all about dodgy statues. You'd find them on the East Coast, you'd find them on the West Coast, probably all manufactured in Taiwan. It's completely different. There has been this massive upsurgence of talent coming from literally, as you said, all 4 corners of the continent: Mali, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, South Africa. And they are representing the sort of new wave of African design that is really taking the world by storm.
Now, Terry, you travel all over the continent. You see the very best and sometimes the very worst of the African continent. What makes African design different?
I think 2 things. I think firstly, people are quite proud of their heritage. So they're interpreting their cultural heritage in some quite interesting ways. And the second thing is African designers are not modernizing, or not westernizing, they're modernizing. So you bring this sort of rich cultural heritage together with a real genuine African sense of modernism. And the results have been quite special.
Now, it's one thing to put the things on the market, but are Africans interested in buying African design? Are we seeing the money being spent on buying local and buying African design?
I think, yeah, I think we're finding that it happens in different areas. So you have like the mass market brands like Lokshan Culture in South Africa are a great success. You have a lot of mid-market brands, guys like Holmes Brothers, who are also being quite successful. Then you start to break into the continental and international sphere. So continentally, there's a new place opened up recently in Lagos called Alara, which was a beautiful store designed by David Adjaye, who's probably the world's best-known architect of African descent. And is just populated with top-end African goods that are flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
And then internationally, they cannot get enough of this stuff. African designers are exhibiting at Art Basel, Art Dubai, Art Miami, all over the world at the top shows. What's quite interesting is when you look at the quality of these items, they are absolutely unique.
Business, international business and brands, are they now sitting up and taking notice and spending their dollars in Africa? Hopefully.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think the international brands have kind of cottoned on to the fact that this sort of style of design, or African design, is a deep sort of sense of cultural heritage. It's rooted quite deeply in the African psyche. And they're starting to look at that design process and trying to figure out how to kind of engage with it, how to find the right partners, and how to sort of bring that to life. I think African brands are doing so as well. SAA spent quite a bit of time kind of trying to rebrand its image so it looked a little less South African, a lot more African, and it's been applauded for that. And you have banks like GT in West Africa who bring this sense of cultural confidence to the fore, and it is connecting with young people across the continent.
The future. What does the future look like? Is it a sort of more postmodern African design?
Yeah, when we call it sort of Afro-chic design, to give it a label, I think it's quite an interesting period at the moment. If you look at design in the States in the 1920s, you have the sort of Art Deco movement. It's very, very distinctive. What's also equally distinctive is the movements that came out of Europe in the sort of Bauhaus movement. But in Africa, it's not yet, you can't yet say that's a certain style of design. It's quite broad, it's quite engaging, but it's quite unique.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is manufacturing. If you look at other markets, even sort of more modern markets like Taiwan, they built a really strong design base and they've built a strong manufacturing base to support it. Here, what you have is African designers are inherently makers. They have to make their own stuff because they don't have the manufacturing processes to support that. So once that comes on stream, I think we're going to be a powerhouse.
Well, we look forward to that, Terry. We have to build the African century. That's what we are building. Manufacturing is a key. I agree with you. Terry Bien is a frequent contributor on the Newsroom show and will be throughout the rest of the year. He'll give us updates from all corners of Africa. Wherever he travels, he's there, well, almost every week, it seems. Thanks, Terry. Thanks for being in. We talked about African design today. Who knows? We might be talking technology in Nigeria next week, or arts and crafts in Kenya. We expect to have Terry back within the next couple of weeks. Before we say goodbye, of course, there's a small matter of the World Cup happening. This is in New Zealand, of course. The UAE, in reply to Pakistan's 339 for 6, they are losing quite badly. They're on 142 for 6 after 39 overs. Very, very little chance of them getting across the line there. It's a match, of course, that the Pakistan will win. Of course, the Irishman here, Terry Bien, is with me, and South Africa beat them quite badly yesterday. No ill feelings, no hard feelings. You guys are better at rugby, obviously.
Can we talk about the rugby, please?
Going to the World Cup is favourites, he says, for the Rugby World Cup later this year. Thanks for joining us, Terry. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. Remember, we're also live on YouTube throughout that time, with the show available on demand the whole day. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.